In the Buddhist tradition, there is a teaching that says, we do not suffer because we feel. We suffer because we do not understand what we feel. And anger may be the most misunderstood of all human experiences. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. Over the coming hours, we will look at what the Buddha taught about anger, how it arises, how it takes hold of the mind, and why it so often leads to suffering. We will also explore the Buddhist view that anger does not appear on its own, but grows from causes and conditions, from fear, attachment, hurt, expectation, and the wish for things to be other than they are. There is nothing you need to do right now. Just relax and let these words settle into you like rain soaking into soft earth. Thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk. Let us begin. The Buddha once said that our life is shaped by our mind. What we think, we become. And for many of us, the thoughts that arrive most often, with the most force, are the ones wrapped in anger. They come in the middle of dinner. They come in the quiet of a car ride. They come from the people we love. Why is it that the people closest to us are the ones who can hurt us the most? A stranger's rudeness stings, but it passes. A loved one's careless word can stay with us for years. The people we have let inside our heart have access that no one else has. And that access brings a kind of friction unlike anything else. This is not a flaw in closeness. It is part of closeness. In Zen, there is a saying, the obstacle is the path. The things that challenge us are not separate from the work. They are the work. And this is especially true in our closest relationships. The Buddhist tradition has always understood that anger is part of our nature. It predates language, predates culture, predates every philosophy that has tried to explain it. Long before we had words for what we felt, anger was already doing its job. It was the part of us that recognized, something I care about is being threatened. Something I need is not being met. Anger is intelligent. It is a signal. It is a guard standing watch at the edges of what matters to us. When we feel dismissed, anger rises to protect our need to be respected. When we feel abandoned, anger rises to protect our need to belong. When we feel lied to, anger rises to protect our need for trust. It always points to something real. The Tibetan Buddhist teachers describe the essence of anger as wise discrimination. There is a clarity inside it, a sharp recognition that something needs attention. The problem is never the recognition itself. The problem is what happens when the recognition takes over, when the guard at the gate stops alerting us and starts running the whole house. The question has never been how to stop feeling anger. The question is how to stop being ruled by it. The Dhammapada, one of the oldest collections of the Buddha's teachings, compares the person who catches anger early to a skilled charioteer who steadies a cart before it veers off the road. Others, the text says, merely hold the reins. The charioteer does not destroy the horses. He does not abandon the cart. He finds the moment of steadying, the point where attention meets force, and guides it. That is the question running through everything we will explore tonight. How do we find that moment of steadying? How do we shift from being pulled by anger to being present with it? But first we need to understand something simpler. We need to understand why closeness and friction always arrive together. There is an old parable, told across many traditions, about a colony of porcupines and the coldest winter any of them had ever known. It began in late autumn, in the high hills, when the air turned sharp and the ground grew hard. The porcupines were a small group. They lived among the rocks and roots of a wooded hillside, and for most of the year they kept a comfortable distance from one another. Each had its own hollow. Each had its own path through the brush. They were not unfriendly, but they were careful, the way creatures covered in quills learn to be careful. Then the cold came. It came first as a thin wind through the trees, the kind that found every gap in the fur. Then it came as ice on the streams. Then it came as a deep silence, the silence of a winter that meant to stay. The smaller creatures went underground. The birds left. The deer moved down the mountain. Snow covered the paths, and the nights grew so long they seemed to swallow the days. The porcupines, huddled in their separate hollows, began to feel the cold in their bones. One by one, they moved toward each other. It was not a decision anyone made out loud. It was something the body knew. Warmth was life, and warmth meant closeness. They gathered in the largest hollow beneath a great stone. They pressed together, and for a short time the warmth was good. The shivering eased. Then the quills began to prick. It was unavoidable. Every shift, every small movement brought a quill against a neighbor's side. One flinched and bumped another. That one moved away and nudged a third. Soon the hollow was full of discomfort and growing irritation. They tried to hold still. They tried to rearrange themselves. But porcupines are covered in quills. There was no position without some cost. So they separated again. They went back to their own hollows, sore and frustrated. And the cold came back, worse than before. Now they knew what warmth felt like, and the absence of it was sharper for having been tasted. Some of them began to weaken. The youngest and the oldest felt it first. Alone, the cold was not something any of them could survive. So, for the second time, they chose. They returned to the hollow beneath the stone. They pressed close again. And this time, they did not leave when the quills pricked. They adjusted. They flinched, but they stayed. They learned which angles were gentler. They learned to move slowly. They did not stop being porcupines. They did not shed their quills. But they chose the small, ongoing discomforts of closeness over the large, quiet cost of freezing alone. That is how they survived the coldest winter. Together, pricked and warm. This parable has lasted for centuries because it describes something every human being recognizes. The people closest to us prick us the most. A partner who forgets something important. A parent whose tone carries old weight. A friend who speaks carelessly about something that matters to us. These are not grand betrayals. They are the small, repeated frictions of closeness. And they hurt because the person matters. The Buddha taught that we do not argue only about the present moment. When two people who care about each other clash, they bring everything with them. Old fears, old hurts, old winters. The anger that rises when a loved one speaks sharply is almost never only about what was said. It is about every time we have felt that same kind of sting. The quills of the past walk into the room with us, and they are sharper than anything the present moment could produce on its own. Two people sitting across from each other at a kitchen table are never just two people. They are two people, plus every unfinished conversation, every swallowed complaint, every moment one of them felt unseen by the other. The argument about dishes is never about dishes. The argument about being late is never about the clock. These surface quarrels are the visible part of something much deeper, and anger is what pushes those deeper things to the surface. This is part of what makes anger so confusing. The force of it rarely matches the size of the moment. A forgotten errand becomes a question about whether we are valued. A cancelled plan becomes evidence that we do not matter. The heat that floods through us is not madness. It is the accumulated weight of every time that particular tender place was pressed. We are not overreacting. We are reacting to more than the person in front of us knows about. The Buddhist teaching on anger begins here, with understanding, not with how to stop anger, but with seeing clearly what anger is and where it comes from. When we can see that the fire burning in this moment was lit long ago, something shifts. We stop blaming the person who happens to be standing near the flame. We start looking at the fire itself. And when we look, we find that it has been trying to show us something all along, a need, a care, a tenderness that we have not yet attended to. There is a story from another tradition that makes the cost of everyday friction very clear. It concerns two ferrymen who worked the same river crossing for most of their lives. They had started young, both of them, inheriting the work from their fathers. The river was wide at that point, and the current strong, and it took two boats, working in turns, to keep the crossing running from dawn until dark. One would row while the other rested on the bank. Then they would trade. Day after day, season after season, for more years than either of them counted. They were not enemies. They shared a fire on cold mornings and split whatever food the travelers brought as payment. But they quarreled constantly, the way two people who spend every day together will quarrel. One thought the other was too slow with the oars. The other thought his companion loaded the boats unevenly. There were arguments about whose turn it was to bail water after rain, about who had let the rope fray, about a dozen small things that mattered to no one else on earth. "You let the mooring slip again," one would say, shaking his head as the boat drifted. "You always let it slip." "I let it slip because you tied it wrong," the other would answer, hauling the rope back in. "You have been tying it wrong for 20 years. And you have been complaining about it for 20 years. Because you have been doing it wrong for 20 years. A traveler once asked if they were brothers. They both laughed. "Worse," one of them said. "We are partners." They were like two stones in the same riverbed, grinding against each other with the current. The friction was so familiar that neither of them noticed it anymore. It was just part of the day, like the water itself. Then one spring, the older ferryman did not come down to the river. He had fallen ill in the night. By evening, he was gone. The remaining ferryman rowed alone the next morning. The river was the same. The current was the same. The passengers climbed in and climbed out, same as always. But the silence on the far bank, where the other man used to sit mending nets or warming his hands or complaining about the weather, that silence was enormous. He rowed all day. By the time the sun went down, he understood something that years of working side by side had hidden from him. Every argument they had ever had was the sound of two lives pressed up against each other. Every complaint about the rope, every sharp word across the water was proof that they were there, present, together, caring about the same small stretch of river, noticing the same small things. He sat on the bank that evening and looked at the empty place where his companion used to sit. And he realized that he would have given anything for one more argument about the rope. One more complaint about the oars. One more cold morning sharing a fire and grumbling about the fog. He did not make any grand resolution. He simply understood, for the first time, how much warmth those years of small grievances had held. The quarrels were not wasted time. They were the texture of a shared life. They were proof, every single day, that someone was close enough to notice what he did and care about how he did it. And he carried that understanding with him. When the next young ferryman came to learn the work, the older man was kinder with him, not because he had become a saint, because he had learned what a day without friction actually looked like. It looked like a day without anyone close enough to care. These two stories point to the same thing. Anger in our closest relationships is not a sign that something is broken. It is a sign that something is alive. Two people who never irritate each other are two people who have stopped being close enough to touch. The Buddha taught that suffering comes not from what we feel, but from what we do with what we feel. The porcupines suffered when they tried to avoid all contact. The ferryman suffered when he realized how much warmth he had spent on resentment. The middle way runs between the extremes. We do not flee from closeness to avoid the quills. We do not pretend the quills are not there. We hold both the warmth and the sharpness, and we stay. This is one of the harder truths about being human. We cannot have the depth of love without the risk of anger. We cannot have the comfort of being truly known by another person without also being truly vulnerable to them. Every relationship that matters to us will, at some point, produce heat. The spouse who knows exactly which words will sting. The parent who can activate something in us that no one else can reach. The friend whose silence hurts more than a stranger's shout. These are not signs that we have chosen the wrong people. These are signs that we have chosen real closeness, and real closeness has quills. The Dhammapada says, conquer anger through gentleness, unkindness through kindness, greed through generosity, and falsehood by truth. That word conquer does not mean suppress. It does not mean ignore. It means to meet with something larger. Gentleness is larger than anger, and truth, spoken with care, is larger than any falsehood. In Zen, there is a teaching, when you understand, things are just as they are. When you do not understand, things are just as they are. The porcupines still have quills. The ferrymen still argue about the rope. Nothing about the outer situation changes. What changes is what we see when we look at it. Friction between two hearts that care about each other is not failure. It is the sound of closeness. The next time someone you love says something that pricks, before the story of offense begins to build, see if you can notice something else first. The closeness. This person is near enough to hurt you, and that nearness is everything. The quills are the price of the warmth. You might try this in the days ahead. When the prick comes, before the familiar story takes hold, silently note one word: closeness. Just that. You do not have to do anything with the anger. You do not have to fix it or explain it. Just notice what is underneath it. Almost always, it is someone who matters to you, standing close enough to touch. Let us pause here for a moment. There is no rush. Let your breathing settle. When you feel ready, we will continue together. There is a line from the Buddhist teachings that says, what you resist persists. It is one of those teachings that sounds simple until you try to live it. Nowhere is it more true than with anger. Most of us learned early that anger is not welcome. A parent's face hardening, a teacher's sharp voice. The message was clear. This feeling is a problem. And so we learned to push it down. We clench our teeth. We smile when we want to shout. We swallow what we feel. Some of us became the kind of person who never gets angry, or at least never shows it. But here is something the Buddha understood thousands of years ago. A feeling that is refused does not leave. It does not dissolve because we ignore it. It simply finds another way in. It comes back as bitterness. It comes back as exhaustion. It comes back as a tightness in the body that never fully relaxes. It comes back as a sharpness in our voice that surprises even us. It comes back as the resentment that builds so slowly we do not notice it until it has reshaped the way we see the person across from us. What if anger has been trying to tell us something for years and we have never once let it finish? In Zen Buddhism, there is a deep understanding that our emotions are not who we are. They visit us. They arise under certain conditions. They pass through. The Buddha compared thoughts and feelings to clouds moving across the sky. The sky is not the clouds. The sky is what remains when the clouds pass. And yet, we spend most of our lives chasing clouds, or running from them, or trying to hold them in place. Anger is one of these clouds. It arrives under certain conditions. It passes when those conditions change. It is not our nature. It is not our identity. And it carries information. The Tibetan Buddhist teachers describe the essence of anger as wise discrimination. Underneath the heat, underneath the tightness and the urge to lash out, there is a clarity. There is a recognition that something needs attention. Something has been crossed. Something we care about has been overlooked or dismissed or harmed. The anger itself is not the message. It is the messenger. And we have been so busy trying to silence the messenger that we have never read the letter. Let us explore an old Zen story that speaks to this. A traveler once came to a monastery in the mountains, seeking guidance from the teacher who lived there. He was a decent man, well-meaning, but he carried a burden he could not put down. "I have a terrible temper," he told the teacher. "It comes over me like a storm, and I cannot control it. It has cost me friendships. It has driven away people I care about. I want to be free of it. Can you help me?" The teacher, who was very old, sat quietly for a moment. Then he said, "This temper of yours, I would like to see it. Show it to me now." The traveler looked confused. "I cannot show it to you now," he said. "It is not here right now. It comes without warning. Sometimes a small thing will set it off, and before I know it, I am shouting or saying things I do not mean." "So it is not here now," the teacher said. "No. And when it comes, how long does it stay?" The traveler thought about this. "Sometimes a few minutes, sometimes longer, but eventually it goes. And when it goes, where does it go?" The traveler paused. "I do not know. It just passes. And then I feel terrible about whatever I have said or done." "So let me understand," the teacher said. "It is not here now. It was not here when you were born. It comes under certain conditions stays for a while, and then leaves. And when it leaves, you are still here. Yes. Then this temper is not your true nature, the teacher said. If it were, it would be here all the time, the way your eyes are here, the way your hands are here. It would not come and go. You were not born angry. Anger visits you, and when the visit is over, you remain. The traveler sat with this for a long time, but when it comes, it feels like it is all of me, like there is no space between me and the anger. Yes, the teacher said, that is what happens when we do not see a visitor arriving. The visitor walks in and takes over the whole house. But the moment you recognize a visitor as a visitor, something changes. You are still the house. The guest is still the guest. Watch for the arrival. See it come through the door, and you will find that you are not its servant. This is one of the most important shifts in how we relate to anger. As long as we believe anger is who we are helpless inside it. But the moment we recognize it as a visitor, we find a space between the anger and ourselves. We can say to ourselves, anger is here. Not I am angry, which makes the anger the whole of who we are. Just anger is here. It has arrived. It will pass. And while it is here, it may have something to show me. That shift from I am angry to anger is here changes everything. And once we have that space, we can do something we could never do before. We can ask the anger what it wants. We can read the letter, because beneath every anger there is a need. This is one of the clearest teachings in the Buddhist understanding of suffering. We hurt when something we need is not being met. When we feel dismissed, the need is to be acknowledged. When we feel ignored, the need is to be seen. When we feel lied to, the need is for trust. When we feel controlled, the need is for freedom. When we feel disrespected, the need is to be valued. When we feel abandoned, the need is to belong, to feel safe, to feel that we matter, to feel that we are told the truth. These are the basic needs of every human heart. The anger is the alarm. The need is what the alarm is pointing to. But most of us never get to the need. We get stuck on the alarm. We fixate outward on the person who triggered it. We build a case against them. We replay what they said. We rehearse what we should have said. We assign motives. We keep a silent record of offenses. And all the while, the need sits unheard in the center of our chest, still waiting, still asking its quiet question, will someone please attend to me? There is another story that carries this teaching. In an ancient city, there was a young apprentice who worked under a master craftsman. The master was skilled in his trade, respected throughout the district, but he was a harsh man. When things went wrong in the workshop, his voice filled the room like a sudden wind. He criticized freely and loudly. He did not think of the effect his words had on those around him, or if he did not show it. And over time, the apprentice began to shrink inside herself. She stopped speaking up. She stopped trusting her own hands. She flinched at loud sounds, even outside the workshop, even on the street. She went to an elder in the city, a woman known for her steadiness and warmth, and asked for help. "I feel nothing when he shouts," the apprentice said. "I have gone numb." The elder listened carefully. Then she said something the apprentice did not expect. "You have not gone numb. You have gone underground. There is a feeling in you, a very strong one, but you have locked it away because you believe it is not allowed to be here." The apprentice was quiet for a long time. Then, slowly, tears came. And behind the tears, something hot and fierce rose up from a place she had been keeping sealed. "I am angry," she said, and her voice shook as she said it. The elder did not flinch. She simply said, "Good. That anger has been waiting for you. It is allowed to be here. It is forgiven for being here. Can you let it stay, just for now, without pushing it away?" "I was always told it was wrong to feel this," the apprentice said. "You were told that by people who were also afraid of their own anger," the elder said gently. "But feelings are like weather. They come. They are not good or bad. They are simply what is happening. And this one has been trying to reach you for a long time." The apprentice sat with it. She let the heat fill her chest. She did not act on it. She did not plan what she would say to the master. She simply let the feeling be present, the way rain is present, without anyone deciding whether it should be raining. And in the quiet, beneath the anger, she began to hear something. A voice much younger than her own, saying, "I need to feel safe. I need to be spoken to with respect. I need to know that I am not small." The elder asked, "What is the anger telling you?" "That I deserve to be treated differently," the apprentice said. "That the way he speaks to me is not something I have to accept." "And what do you need?" "Safety. Respect." Those two words changed everything. Not the situation. The master was still the master. The workshop was still the workshop. But the apprentice was no longer lost inside the anger, and she was no longer numb beneath it. She had found the message inside the feeling. And once she knew what she needed, she could act from that knowledge rather than from the raw heat of the anger itself. She went to the master and spoke plainly. "I will continue to work for you," she said, "but I will not stay in the room when voices are raised. If I am spoken to with disrespect, I will leave until the air clears." The master stared at her. He was not used to being spoken to this way. "I am not leaving your workshop," she continued. "I am saying what I need in order to stay." She did not shout. She did not accuse. She did not list his offenses or tell him he was wrong. She simply named what she needed and drew a clear line. And the line held, because it came from a place of quiet knowing rather than from fury. The anger had done its work. It had shown her what mattered. And from that clear seeing, she could act with steadiness rather than with heat. The Buddha taught that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Pain is the sting of the moment. Suffering is what happens when we add layers to it. Stories, judgments, blame, the endless loop of how could they, and they always, and I should have. Anger works the same way. The initial flash of anger is clean. It is a signal, quick and clear. In that brief flash, we can see something real. A need, a boundary, a truth about what matters to us. But when we do not read the signal, when we push the anger down or let it take over, the signal becomes a fire. And the fire becomes a story. The story might be, he does not respect me, or she does not care, or nobody listens. And the story can burn for years, fed by every new slight that seems to confirm it. What began as a simple signal, a messenger trying to deliver a letter, becomes a whole identity. We become the angry one, the bitter one, the one with the grudge. The Buddha put it simply, holding on to anger is like gripping a hot coal with the intention of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. The teaching is not that we should never feel anger. The teaching is that we should not grip it. We should let it arrive, hear what it has to say, and then open our hand. This is the difference between anger felt and anger held. Anger felt is clean, brief, informative. It tells us something true and then it is ready to go. Anger held becomes resentment, and resentment is a coal we carry in our palm long after the reason for picking it up has passed. We keep carrying it because we think putting it down means the other person wins. But there is no winning with a coal in your hand. There is only burning. The practice here is very gentle. The next time you notice irritation rising, the next time that familiar heat appears in your chest or your jaw, try asking one quiet question. Not out loud. Just inside, the way you might ask a child what is wrong. Ask, what do you need? You do not have to answer it right away. You do not have to do anything with the answer. Just ask and listen. The anger has been carrying that answer for a long time. It may be relieved to finally be heard. Take a breath here. Let whatever came up for you settle like dust after a footstep on a quiet road. Whenever you are ready, we will go on. The Buddha taught that between any event and our response to it, there is a space. Most of the time, that space is so small, we do not notice it. Someone says something hurtful, and we react before we have finished hearing it. A promise is broken, and we are already building our case before the disappointment has fully arrived. The sting comes, and the strike follows so quickly they feel like the same thing. But they are not the same thing. The sting is what happens to us. The strike is what we do about it. And between the two, there is a gap. It may last only a heartbeat. It may be the length of a single breath. But it is there. And inside that gap lives our whole freedom. Without the gap, we are automatic. We are machines. Stimulus, response. Push, push back. Someone raises their voice, we raise ours. Someone blames us, we blame them. It is ancient, it is instinctive, and it almost never gets us what we actually need. The Buddhist path is, in many ways, the practice of finding that gap and learning to live inside it. Tonight we are going to look at that space. We are going to explore what the Buddhist teachers call the pause and the U-turn. The pause is simply stopping before we react. The U-turn is what we do once we have stopped. Instead of looking outward at the person who triggered us, we turn our attention inward, toward our own heart, to find what is actually happening inside us. These two movements, the pause and the turn inward, are the foundation of everything we have been exploring tonight. Let us begin with a story about the power of a pause. In an ancient kingdom, there lived a ruler who was known for his quick temper. When angered, he made decisions fast and harshly. He would summon his advisors, demand punishment for whoever had offended him, and expect the matter settled before sundown. His chief counselor was a quiet man, patient by nature, who had served the court for many years. And this counselor had a habit that puzzled everyone. Whenever the ruler summoned him in anger, demanding swift action against someone, the counselor always found a reason to delay. "I want this man removed from his post by sundown," the ruler would say. his face dark with fury. "Of course," the counselor would reply calmly. "I will prepare the order. But the proper seal is with the keeper of records, and he has gone to the next district. I will have everything ready by tomorrow." The ruler would protest. The counselor would bow, agree entirely with the ruler's reasoning, and assure him it would all be handled first thing in the morning. Or perhaps a merchant had been accused of dishonesty, and the ruler wanted him thrown from the city. "The law requires 2 witnesses for a matter of this kind," the counselor would say. "Allow me until morning to find them." The excuses were always reasonable, always calm, always just long enough. And by the next day, without fail, the ruler's fury had cooled. What had seemed unforgivable the night before looked different in the morning light. The ruler would look at the order waiting for his signature and say, "Perhaps this was too hasty. Let us look at it again." The counselor would nod as if this were a surprising turn of events and suggest a gentler course. The counselor never argued with the ruler. He never told him he was wrong. He never said, "You are too angry to decide this now." He simply made space. He placed a day between the ruler's anger and the ruler's action. And in that day, something wiser than fury had time to arrive. Over the years, many people in that kingdom were quietly spared because of a counselor who understood that anger makes poor decisions and that time is the simplest form of mercy. He never received credit for it. Nobody knew how many harsh orders were softened overnight. That was fine with him. The work was the work. There is another story that carries the same teaching in a different form. A ruler in a distant land once heard that a wandering sage was passing through his territory. He sent for the man and asked him, "What is the most valuable piece of advice you can give me?" The sage thought for a moment. Then he said, "Pause before you act." The ruler waited for more. The sage said nothing. "That is all?" the ruler asked. "That is everything," the sage replied. The ruler, though disappointed, paid the sage generously and sent him on his way. But the words stayed with him. He had them inscribed on his drinking cups, on the lintels of his doors, on the basin where he washed his hands each morning. Every day, in small moments, the words met his eyes. "Pause before you act. Pause before you act." Years passed. The ruler forgot about the sage, but the words remained, carved into the surfaces of his daily life. Then one night, a man crept into the ruler's chambers. He had been sent to pour poison into the ruler's cup while he slept. He moved through the dark room, found the cup by the bedside, and reached for it. His fingers touched the rim, and in the faint light, he felt the letters carved into the surface. He traced them without thinking. "Pause before you act." He stopped. He stood in the dark with the poison in one hand and the cup in the other, and something shifted inside him. He set down the cup. He set down the poison. And when morning came, he went to the ruler and confessed what he had been sent to do. 2 lives were saved by 4 words carved into a cup. The pause does not always last an evening. Sometimes it lasts only long enough to read a sentence. Sometimes it lasts only long enough to take one breath. But even one breath can be enough to change what happens next. The pause, in Buddhist teaching, is not suppression. Suppression is pushing a feeling down and pretending it is not there. It does not resolve anything. It just moves the pressure underground. The pause is something very different. In the pause, the anger is still there. The hurt is still there. Nothing is being denied. You are simply giving yourself a moment to feel what you feel before you decide what to do about it. And sometimes the pause takes longer than a breath. Sometimes the pause takes an hour. Sometimes it takes a full day. In the story of the counselor, the pause took until morning. And that is fine. Returning to a difficult conversation a day later, with more clarity and less heat, is not weakness. It is one of the bravest things a person can do in a relationship. It means valuing the connection more than the need to be right in this moment. What matters is what we do with the pause. And this is where the Buddhist teaching invites us to make the U-turn. Instead of spending the pause rehearsing our argument, building our case, sharpening our words for the next encounter, we turn our attention inward. We bring it to what is happening in our own body and heart. We ask, what am I actually feeling right now? What is underneath the anger? Because anger, as we explored in the last module, is almost always a surface layer. Underneath it, there is usually something softer and more vulnerable. Hurt, fear, grief. The feeling of being unseen or unloved or disrespected. The anger is the armor. The pause and the U-turn let us set the armor down, just for a moment, and look at what it was protecting. The Buddha taught this as a layered practice. First we stop, then we feel, then we look. And what we find, when we look, is almost never what we expected. We expected to find that the other person was wrong. Instead, we find that we are hurting. And that is where the real work begins. Let us explore one more story before we rest. A potter in a small village discovered that her young son had taken cakes from a neighbor's stall without paying. She heard about it from the neighbor, who was kind about it, and when she sat her son down and asked him, he looked her in the eye and said, "I did not do it. Someone is lying about me." What rose in her was not ordinary anger. It was something enormous, far larger than the situation seemed to deserve. She wanted to shout. She wanted to grab him by the shoulders. The force of it frightened her. But she paused. "I need to step away for a while," she told him. "We will talk about this later." She went to the small courtyard behind the house and sat down. She let the anger come without acting on it. She did not push it down. She let it be there, all of it, hot and tight in her chest. The thoughts came too. He looked me in the eye. He lied to my face. What kind of child does this? Where did I go wrong? The thoughts circled and circled, each one adding fuel. She recognized this. She had done it before, the spinning, the building of the case. And she knew, from everything she had learned, that the case was not what needed her attention right now. What needed her attention was the feeling underneath the case. So she let the thoughts pass like clouds, and she came back to her body. And slowly, underneath the anger, she found something else. Hurt. Her son had lied to her face. And that hurt more than the taking. The taking was a child's mistake, the kind any child might make. The lie was something different. The lie was a door closed between them. And underneath the hurt, she found something deeper still. Grief. A sense that the closeness she treasured with her child had been cut. There was nothing in her life that mattered more than the trust between them, and for a moment it had been severed, and the severing felt like a kind of loss she did not have a name for. She sat with that grief for a long time. She did not rush past it to find a solution. She did not start planning what she would say. She just let it be there, and she held it gently, without judgment. She was not a bad mother for feeling this. He was not a bad child for doing this. They were two people in a hard moment, and the hard moment needed something real from her. Not fury, not a lecture, something real. When she went back inside, she sat beside her son. She did not raise her voice. She said, "I was very angry when I heard what happened. But when I sat with my anger, I found that underneath it, I was hurt. And underneath the hurt, I was sad. Because the thing I care about most between us is that we can be honest with each other. And when you told me something that was not true, it felt like we lost that for a moment." She cried as she said it, not dramatically, just honestly. The tears came because the words were true. Her son watched her face. He was quiet for a long time, and then his own defenses fell apart, the way defenses do when they meet something real instead of something harsh. He admitted what he had done. He cried too. And they sat together in the simple, awkward tenderness of two people who had come through a hard thing by being honest about what it actually felt like. No punishment could have produced what that honesty produced. No lecture, no raised voice, no grounding or taken privilege could have brought them to that place. What brought them there was the pause and the U-turn and the willingness to speak from the vulnerable place rather than the armored one. This is the heart of tonight's teaching. When we are hurt from outside, the instinct is to strike back outward, to blame, to defend, to argue. The whole body leans forward, ready to fight. But the U-turn says, go inward first. Find out what is actually happening in your own heart. Name it. Feel it. Hold it with some kindness. And only then, from that honest place, turn back outward and speak. The difference is enormous. When we speak from anger, the other person's defenses go up. They stop listening. They start building their own case. And the conversation becomes two people shouting across the distance between them, each one trying to be heard and neither one listening. But when we speak from the truth underneath the anger, from the hurt, the fear, the need, something else happens entirely. The other person can hear us, because we are no longer attacking. We are being real. And realness is the only thing that dissolves defenses. The potter did not say, "How could you lie to me?" That would have been speaking from anger. She said, "When you told me something that was not true, I felt like we lost something." That was speaking from the hurt underneath the anger. And her son heard her. His defenses came down not because he was overpowered, but because he was met with something honest. This is what the Buddha meant when he spoke of right speech. Right speech is not polite speech. It is not careful, controlled, diplomatic speech. It is speech that comes from having first done the inner work. It is speech that has passed through the pause and the U-turn and arrived at the place of truth. You do not have to do this perfectly. Sometimes the pause will not come in time. Sometimes you will react before you can stop yourself, and the words will be out before you know it. That is part of being human. When it happens, you forgive yourself and you begin again. The practice does not ask for perfection. It asks for willingness. One breath before you respond. One moment of turning inward before turning outward. That is enough. And when you miss the breath, that is enough too. You notice, you forgive, and the next time, the gap may be a little wider. Rest here for a moment. Let the stories settle. Let your body soften where it has been holding. When you feel ready, we will continue. Think of the last time you won an argument with anger. Think of the last time your raised voice actually got you what you needed. Understanding, closeness, respect, a genuine change in how things are between you and the other person. For most of us, the honest answer is, anger has never won us what we really needed. It has won us compliance, sometimes. It has won us silence. It has won us the brief satisfaction of seeing the other person back down. But it has almost never produced understanding. It has almost never brought two people closer. And the things we said in anger, the things we wish we could take back, those are still in the room long after the argument has ended. They do not disappear. They become part of the history that two people carry between them. They sit in the air of a relationship, like smoke after a fire, coloring everything that comes after. There is a cost to acting from anger, and it is higher than most of us realize until the bill comes due. The cost is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is just the slow erosion of trust, the gradual dimming of warmth. The way a person starts to choose their words more carefully around us, not out of respect, but out of caution. The way a child learns to read our mood before speaking. These are quiet costs. They do not announce themselves, but they add up. The Buddha spoke often about the cost of acting from anger. He compared it to picking up a burning coal with the intention of throwing it at someone. You can throw it, and perhaps it will land, but your hand is already burned. You were burned the moment you picked it up. It does not matter whether the throw was justified. It does not matter whether the other person deserved it. The burn on your own hand is the same either way. That image is simple and clear. And it has lasted for 2,500 years because every human being who has ever lost their temper knows exactly what it describes. The heat in the hand, the regret that comes after, the realization, too late, that the throw did not fix anything, and now there are two people hurting instead of one. The argument may have been won. The relationship now carries a mark that was not there before. And yet we keep picking up the coal. We keep thinking that this time will be different. That if we shout loud enough, the other person will finally hear us. That if we make our case sharply enough, they will finally understand. We know, from every past experience, that it does not work this way. But the pull of the habit is strong. And in the moment of anger, the habit is louder than the knowing. When anger takes over, it wears different faces. It is useful to recognize them because most of us have one or two patterns we fall into without thinking. Sometimes anger is direct and loud. The raised voice, the sharp words, the things said in the heat of the moment that cannot be unsaid. It comes out fast, and there is a release in it, a brief and powerful feeling of having been heard. And then, almost immediately, the cost, the look on the other person's face, the silence that follows, the conversation that is now harder to have, not easier, because something has been broken that was not broken before. Most people who lash out in anger know, even as they are doing it, that it will not help. But the force of the habit is stronger than the knowing. Sometimes anger is quieter but no less present. It shows up as withdrawal, the cold silence after a disagreement, the affection held back, the short answers, the small, indirect comments that carry a sting without ever being direct enough to address. Fine. Do whatever you want. A person can live with this kind of anger for years, in a household where nothing is ever shouted and nothing is ever said. The surface looks calm. Underneath, the water is frozen solid. Sometimes anger takes the form of keeping score, a mental ledger of every offense, every slight, every time the other person fell short. Nothing is said in the moment. The record just grows, quietly, entry after entry. And when it finally comes out, it comes out all at once, a flood of old grievances the other person did not even know were being collected. And another thing becomes the most common phrase in the conversation, and the person on the other end has no idea how they ended up defending something they said 6 months ago. And sometimes anger does not face the person at all. It goes elsewhere. It becomes the story we tell a friend about what our partner did. It becomes the complaint at work about a colleague who is not in the room. It moves sideways, gathering agreement, gathering confirmation that we are right and the other person is wrong. This kind of anger feels safer because we never have to risk the confrontation. But it solves nothing. The person it concerns never hears it, and the distance between us and them grows wider with every retelling. All of these are natural. All of these are human. We have all done every one of them, and all of them share the same problem. They are pointed outward. They are focused on the other person, on what they did or failed to do. And as long as our attention stays out there, we never reach the need underneath our own anger. We stay on the surface, where the heat is, and the deeper truth stays buried. The Buddha taught his students that an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. Anger met with anger does not cancel out. It multiplies. One sharp word invites a sharper one back. One cold silence invites a colder one. One accusation produces a counter-accusation, and before long 2 people who care about each other are standing very far apart, each one convinced they are the injured party, each one waiting for the other to come back first. A Zen master was sitting with his students one evening by a river. The air was warm and the water was slow. The master asked, "Why do people shout when they are angry with each other? They are standing right there, face to face. Their ears work perfectly well. Why do they shout?" One student said, "Because they have lost their calm." Another said, "Because they want to make sure the other person hears them." A third said, "Because the anger is so strong, it pushes the words out louder." The master listened to each answer and shook his head gently. Then he said, "When 2 people are angry, their hearts move apart. Even if they are standing close enough to touch, their hearts are far away from each other. And when there is distance, you have to raise your voice to be heard across it. The angrier they become, the greater the distance, and the louder they must shout. 2 people screaming at each other are 2 hearts that have moved very far apart." The students sat with this. "Now think about the opposite," the master said. "When 2 people are falling in love, how do they speak?" "Softly," one student said. "Yes, softly, because their hearts are close. The distance is small. A whisper is enough." He looked out at the river, and when 2 people have loved each other for a very long time, and the closeness between them is very deep, sometimes they do not even need to speak. A look is enough. A hand resting on the other's hand is enough. Because there is no distance at all. One of the students asked, "So when we shout at someone, we are hearing the distance between us?" "Yes," the master said. "Every time your voice rises in anger, it is telling you how far apart you have moved from the person you are speaking to. And every time you lower your voice, you are closing that distance. Listen to your own volume. It will tell you more than the words themselves." When anger takes over, it creates separation. It builds walls. It pushes people apart. And the great cost of acting from anger, the cost that most of us do not count until afterward, is not the words we said or the argument we won. It is the distance. Consider what it feels like from the other side. When someone raises their voice at us, what happens? We do not open up. We do not become more understanding. We close. We tighten. We build our own defenses. We start preparing our own case. The louder they get, the further away we move. The very thing they are doing to get through to us is the thing that makes us unreachable. This is why anger almost never produces the result it is reaching for. It reaches for connection and produces distance. It reaches for understanding and produces defensiveness. It reaches for respect and produces fear. The method defeats the purpose every time. And the person shouting knows this. Somewhere underneath the heat, they know it. They have been here before. They have shouted before and seen the same result. But the pattern is strong, and in the moment, the pattern runs on its own. It is worth remembering that the person on the receiving end of our anger is having their own experience. They are not standing there calmly weighing our words. They are flooded too. Their heart is racing. Their defenses are going up. Whatever we are saying, however valid the content might be, is landing on a closed door. We are delivering our most important message to someone who has stopped being able to hear it. And the louder we deliver it, the more firmly the door closes. This is the real cost of acting from anger. It is not just the damage to the other person, though that is real. It is the missed connection. It is the conversation that could have happened and did not. It is the understanding that was available right there, if only we had found a different way to reach for it. Think for a moment about the last time you were caught in a cycle of anger with someone. Not the content of the disagreement, but the feeling of it. The tightness in the body. The narrowing of the mind. The sense that the world has shrunk to just this argument, just this person, just this wrong. Everything else drops away. Your sense of humor. Your perspective. Your ability to see the other person as a full human being with their own fears and their own pain. All of it disappears inside what the Buddhist teachers call the cocoon of anger. When it wraps around us, we become small. We think we are being powerful, but we are actually being reduced. The whole world narrows to a single point of blame, and we cannot see past it. And when the anger passes, if we are honest with ourselves, we usually do not feel larger. We feel tired. We feel a little ashamed. We feel the heaviness of something that was not resolved, only expressed. The outburst may have felt like strength in the moment. It rarely feels like strength an hour later. More often it feels like a hangover. The heat is gone, and what remains is the awareness of what it cost. This is the distinction the Buddha drew again and again. There is a difference between feeling anger and acting from anger. Feeling anger is clean and natural. It is the signal we explored earlier, the messenger at the gate, telling us that something we care about needs attention. Acting from anger, letting it drive our words and our choices, is where the cost begins. The feeling informs us. The acting burns us. And the people around us. We do not need to become people who never feel anger. That is not the teaching. We need to become people who can feel it fully without letting it steer. People who can hold the heat without throwing it. People who can hear the message without becoming the message. There is a practice here, and it is very simple. It is just about noticing. The next time you feel your voice rising in a conversation, the next time you hear the volume climbing, just notice it. You do not have to stop it. You do not have to judge it. Simply hear it as information. Your voice is telling you something about the distance between you and the person in front of you. It is telling you that your hearts have moved apart. And once you notice that, a question naturally follows. Is this the direction I want to be moving? Or is there another way to say what I need to say, a way that closes the gap instead of widening it? Sometimes the answer will be to lower your voice. Sometimes the answer will be to stop talking entirely and take a breath. Sometimes the answer will be to say, honestly, I am too far away from you right now to have this conversation well. Let me come back when I am closer. Any of these is enough. The noticing itself is the practice. And if the noticing does not come in time, if the shout has already left your mouth and the coal is already in the air, then you simply notice that. You notice it afterward. You feel the burn. And instead of adding guilt on top of the burn, you bring the same kindness to yourself that you are learning to bring to others. You say, I missed it that time. I will watch for it next time. And the practice continues. The Buddha said, do not speak harshly to anyone. Harsh words come back to you. Those who are hurt may hurt you in return. It is a simple teaching. Speak with care, because words, once released, travel in directions we cannot control. And the distance they create can take a very long time to close. Let your body rest for a moment now. Let the breath come and go on its own. There is nothing to solve, nothing to decide. When you are ready, we will move on together. As long as our peace depends on other people behaving well, we have handed the keys to our own heart to whoever happens to walk through the door. A stranger's rudeness can ruin our morning. A partner's carelessness can ruin our week. A friend's silence can sit in our chest for months. We live at the mercy of what others do and fail to do, and we call this normal. The Buddha had a different view. He taught that we cannot control what others do. We cannot control the weather of the world, but we can take full responsibility for our own experience. Not for what happens to us, for how we meet what happens to us. This teaching sounds simple. It is one of the hardest things a person can do. The word responsible tells us something useful. It comes from response and able. To be responsible is to be able to respond, not to react, not to be pulled by the current, but to choose, even in a difficult moment, how we meet what is in front of us. This is very different from blame. Blame says, this is your fault. Responsibility says, this is mine to tend. Blame looks outward. Responsibility looks inward. Blame asks, who did this to me? Responsibility asks, what am I going to do with what I feel? And it is also, very different from self-blame. This is important. Taking responsibility does not mean telling yourself, "This is my fault. I caused this. I deserve to feel bad." Self-blame is just blame turned inward, and it is just as useless. Responsibility is not about fault at all. It is about capacity. It says, "Regardless of who did what, I have the capacity to attend to my own heart. I have the capacity to choose how I respond." And that capacity is not a burden. It is freedom. The difference between these questions, "Who did this to me?" and "What am I going to do with what I feel?" is the difference between being a prisoner and being free. When we are caught in blame, we are waiting for the other person to apologize, waiting for them to change, waiting for them to admit they were wrong. And while we wait, our anger hardens, our resentment deepens, our peace sits in someone else's hands, and they may never give it back because they may not even know they are holding it. When we take responsibility, we stop waiting. We attend to our own experience. We ask what we need, and we begin to provide it, first for ourselves and then, from that steadier place, for the situation. This is not passivity. It is the most active thing a person can do. It is choosing to tend your own garden instead of standing at the fence, shouting at the weather. Let us explore a story about this. A man once traveled a long distance to study under a Zen master who lived in a monastery high in the mountains. This man was well known in his own village. He was strong, intelligent, and proud of his abilities. When he arrived at the monastery, the master invited him to sit. "Tell me about yourself," the master said. "I am a man of many strengths," the visitor said. "I am strong in body. I am sharp in mind. And I am patient. Very patient. I can endure anything." The master nodded. "That is good to hear. We will begin your training tomorrow morning. Come at sunrise." The man arrived at sunrise. The gate to the monastery was open, but the master's room was empty. A young monk told him to wait. He sat in the courtyard. An hour passed. 2 hours. The morning stretched on. Birds came and went. The sun moved across the stones. Finally, the master appeared, smiled warmly, said, "Ah, you are here. Very good. But I am not quite ready for you today. Come back tomorrow morning," and disappeared, back inside. The man was surprised, but not troubled. He was, after all, a patient man. He returned the next morning. Again the courtyard was empty. Again the young monk told him to wait. Again the hours passed. Near midday the master appeared, chatted pleasantly about the quality of the morning light, and said, "Tomorrow. I think tomorrow we will begin." The man's jaw tightened, just slightly, but he nodded and left. On the third morning, the man arrived with his fists already clenched at his sides. He waited through the morning. He waited into the afternoon. The sun was hot. The courtyard was silent. When the master finally appeared in the doorway, the man stood up, and his voice came out sharp and loud. "I have been coming here for 3 days. I have waited for hours each time. I have been treated as if I do not matter. Is this how you treat someone who has traveled a great distance to study with you?" The master looked at him calmly. "You told me you were patient." "I am patient." "Patient with what?" the master asked. "You are patient when nothing tests you. You are patient when the world moves at your pace and people give you what you expect. But the moment the world does not cooperate, your patience vanishes. That is not patience. That is comfort. The man opened his mouth and closed it. What others do is the weather, the master continued. You cannot control it. You cannot make the rain stop by being angry at the clouds. What you do with what you feel when the rain comes, that is your practice. That is where your freedom lives. Not in the weather, in your response to it. The man sat down again. This time, he did not wait for the master to begin the lesson. He understood that the lesson had already begun 3 days ago, and he had been failing it the whole time. This is the heart of the teaching on responsibility. We are not responsible for how others behave. We are not responsible for the weather of the world, but we are responsible for what we do with our own experience. 100%, not 50%, with the other 50 belonging to whoever upset us. 100%. This does not mean that what others do is acceptable. It does not mean we should tolerate harm or pretend that wrong is right. It means that even when someone has behaved badly, our inner response is still ours. Our anger is ours. Our hurt is ours. And tending to it is our work, not theirs. There is a saying that has been passed down through many teachers. Vengeance is a lazy form of grief. It is a striking phrase. What it means is this: when someone hurts us and we focus on punishing them or proving them wrong or making them pay, we are avoiding the harder work. The harder work is feeling the loss, feeling the hurt, attending to whatever was damaged inside us. Revenge and blame are easier than grief because they keep us in motion. They give us something to do with the pain, but they never bring us to the place where healing actually happens. Healing happens when we stop moving long enough to feel what is there. When we stop building the case against the other person and sit quietly with our own hurt. This is the U-turn we explored earlier, applied to the deepest level, not just turning inward to find the need beneath the anger, but turning inward to find the grief beneath the need. Because beneath the need to be right, there is usually a loss. The loss of trust, the loss of closeness, the loss of the way things were before this happened. And until that loss is felt, fully and honestly, no amount of being right will bring peace. The Buddha taught that the one who has been wronged is like a person holding a burning stick by the wrong end. You can wave the burning end at the person who hurt you. You can threaten them with it. But the end that is burning your own hand is the end that needs your attention first. Let us explore one more story. In a small village, 2 neighbors had been quarreling for weeks over a piece of land that lay between their houses. Each believed the land was rightfully his. The argument had grown bitter. They no longer spoke to each other except in accusations, and their families had taken sides, and the whole village was uneasy with the tension. Finally, they brought their dispute to the village elder, a woman known for her fairness and her unusual way of listening. The first neighbor spoke. He laid out his case thoroughly. He explained how the land had been in his family for generations, how the boundary markers supported his claim, how his neighbor was clearly in the wrong. The elder listened carefully. When he finished, she nodded and said, "You are right." The first neighbor looked satisfied. Then the second neighbor spoke. He laid out his own case with equal conviction. He explained his understanding of the boundary, the work he had done on the land, the agreements he believed were in place. The elder listened just as carefully. When he finished, she nodded and said, "You are right." The second neighbor looked confused. The first neighbor looked angry. A young man who had been watching from the side of the road called out, "Elder, with respect, they cannot both be right. Their claims are opposite." The elder looked at him and said, "You are right, too." There was a long silence. And then, slowly, something shifted in the room. The laughter came first from the young man, then from the neighbors, then from everyone present. Not mocking laughter. The quieter kind that comes when something tight lets go. What the elder understood, and what the neighbors had been too locked in their positions to see, was that being right was not the point. Both men had valid reasons for feeling what they felt. Both had a genuine sense of having been wronged. And as long as each one stood inside his own rightness, insisting the other was wrong, nothing could move. They were stuck. Their rightness was a prison, and the key to getting out was not winning, but letting go of the need to win. After the laughter settled, the elder said, "Now, what do you each actually need?" And for the first time, the two neighbors spoke to each other about what they needed rather than who was right. The conversation was not easy, but it moved. And it moved because the grip of rightness had been loosened. The Buddha taught that attachment is the root of suffering. We usually think of attachment as clinging to things, to possessions or outcomes. But one of the strongest attachments any of us carries is the attachment to being right. We grip our position. We build our case. We rehearse our evidence. And the tighter we grip, the more rigid we become, and the further we move from the person across from us. Taking 100% responsibility means, among other things, releasing the attachment to being right. We may well be right, but being right, by itself, does not get us what we need. It does not bring understanding or closeness or peace. It just brings the satisfaction of being right, which is thin comfort when the relationship is suffering. There is an intention you can hold, quietly, whenever conflict arises. It goes something like this: "May this moment serve understanding. May I learn something through this." It is a small shift, but it changes the entire frame. It turns the person who angered you from an enemy into a teacher. An unpaid and unwelcome teacher, perhaps, but a teacher all the same. Because every person who tests our patience is showing us exactly where our peace is still conditional. Every person who triggers our anger is pointing to a place inside us that still needs tending. The colleague who dismisses our work shows us how much of our worth we have tied to being acknowledged. The partner who forgets something important shows us how much we need to feel that we matter. The friend whose silence stings shows us how deeply we need to feel included. These are not pleasant lessons, but they are precise ones, and they are available nowhere else. No book can show us where our peace breaks down. Only life can show us that. Only the people closest to us can show us that. This does not mean we should thank people for hurting us. It does not mean we should accept harm and call it growth. It means that once the storm has passed, once the pause has been taken and the U-turn made, there is usually something to learn from what happened. And the willingness to learn it, rather than just winning the argument, is what responsibility looks like in practice. You might try a simple version of this. The next time irritation rises, the next time someone's words or actions activate the old heat, try one quiet sentence inside yourself. "This is mine to tend." Say it without harshness. Say it the way you would say it to a garden that needs watering. Not as a burden, but as something that belongs to you and is yours to care for. Let yourself be still for a moment. You do not need to hold anything from what you have heard. What lands will stay? When you feel settled, we will continue. It is possible to say all the right words to someone and have nothing happen at all. To name the feeling, to describe the situation, to ask clearly for what you need, and to watch the other person's eyes stay flat and distant. The words land on the surface and slide off. Nothing opens. Nothing moves. The conversation ends, and both people walk away feeling exactly as they did before, or worse. This happens more often than we might expect. And when it does, it is usually because the words, however correct, were carrying nothing real. They were a performance of honesty rather than honesty itself. The mouth was speaking, but the heart had not yet arrived. The Buddha taught that right speech is one of the foundations of the path. But right speech is not just about choosing careful words. It is about where the words come from. Words that come from the head, from strategy, from the desire to win or to be seen as reasonable, land differently than words that come from the place where we have actually been touched. The first kind of speech manages a situation. The second kind of speech changes it. In the Buddhist understanding of relationships, honesty is not a single event. It is a deepening. Two people who care about each other are always learning how much truth they can bear to exchange. Early on, the truths are easy. I like this. I do not like that. Later, the truths go deeper. I am afraid when you do this. I feel alone when you pull away. And the deepest truths, the ones that can actually heal a rift between two people, are almost always about vulnerability. They are about the soft place beneath the hard surface of the argument. Most of us know how to argue. We know how to build a case. We know how to explain, clearly and logically, why the other person is wrong and we are right. We can do this for hours. What most of us do not know how to do is say the thing underneath the argument. The thing that is actually hurting. The small, undefended truth that we are afraid to speak because it makes us feel exposed. I felt unlovable is harder to say than you never make time for me. I was afraid is harder to say than you are always so angry. The first kind of sentence leaves us open. The second kind of sentence leaves us defended. And we almost always choose the defended version because the open version feels dangerous. It feels like handing someone a map to where we are most tender and hoping they will be gentle with the information. And yet the open version is the only one that has ever really worked. Let us explore a story about this. A husband and wife in an ancient household had a practice between them. Each morning, before the day began, they would sit together in their small courtyard and speak openly about how things stood between them. It was a simple ritual. Sometimes there was nothing to say. Sometimes there was much. But the practice kept them honest, and for years, it served them well. One morning, the husband told his wife that he would need to shorten their time together because he had business to attend to. It was a small thing, but it landed on something old in her, and anger rose quickly. The next morning, she told him so. She was careful about it. She named what had happened clearly. When you told me we would have to cut our time short, I felt angry. She did not accuse. She did not raise her voice. She said it just right. He responded in kind. When you told me you were upset with me, I felt angry too, and afraid, because I need to feel that you understand me and accept me. She repeated his words back to him to show she had heard. He did the same. They followed the form perfectly. Every word was measured, every feeling named, every need stated. And when it was over, they both felt hollow. Nothing had moved. The careful words had landed on nothing. They were still angry. They were still distant. If anything, the distance had grown, because now they had done the right thing, and it had not worked, and that felt worse than the original argument. The form had been followed and the form had failed. It failed because underneath the careful language, each of them was still running a silent judgment. You are wrong, and I am right. She was thinking, if he really cared, he would protect our time together. He was thinking, why can she not accept that one morning is not the end of the world? The words they spoke were honest in the narrow sense, but they were not honest enough. They had named the surface feelings without touching what lay beneath. They did not speak about it again that day. But over the next day, separately and without planning it, each of them did the harder work. Each of them made the U-turn. Each of them sat with the discomfort long enough to go beneath the surface of the argument and find what was actually there. For her, what was underneath the anger was a much younger feeling, a sense of being unlovable. When he shortened their time together, what she heard, beneath the words, was, "You are not important enough. I would rather be elsewhere." And that old feeling of not being enough, not being worthy of someone's full attention, rose up and wrapped itself in anger, so she would not have to feel it directly. The anger was easier to hold than the hurt. It always is. For him, what was underneath was fear. When her anger arrived, something in him tightened and went small. He felt unsafe, the way he had felt as a young person when anger in the household meant something bad was about to happen. His need was simple and deep, to feel safe. To feel that he could be himself, that he could make ordinary decisions about his day without something dangerous following. When they sat together the next morning, they did not follow the form. They did not use careful language or repeat each other's words back. They spoke from what they had actually found. She went first. She said, "When you told me we would cut our time short, I went straight to a place inside me that believes I am not lovable. I felt like I did not matter to you, like you would rather be somewhere else. And that hurt more than I knew how to say yesterday." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "When I felt your anger, I went to a place inside me that is afraid. A young place that does not feel safe when someone is upset with me. I could not hear anything you were saying because I was just trying to survive the feeling. And this time, something opened." Her eyes softened when she heard his fear. She had not known that her anger frightened him. She had thought he was dismissing her, when in fact, he was hiding. His chest loosened when he heard her hurt. He had not known that a single change plan could reach so deep. He had thought she was being controlling, when in fact, she was aching. The defenses that had held firm the day before could not hold against this kind of honesty. They were not being managed. They were being met. And in that meeting, something that had been frozen between them began to move again. This is the difference between technique and truth. Technique without heart produces correct sentences that change nothing. Truth even clumsily spoken, opens doors that no amount of careful language can reach. The form is useful. Naming what happened, naming what you feel, naming what you need. These are good guideposts. But the form only works when it carries something real. And the real thing, every time, is the vulnerable place beneath the anger, the hurt, the fear, the old ache that the present argument has woken up. When she said I felt angry, she was accurate. When she said I went straight to a place inside me that believes I am not lovable, she was real. The difference between those two sentences is the difference between a report and a confession. The first one describes the weather. The second one shows you the landscape. This is not about being dramatic or performing vulnerability. It is about going one layer deeper than we are comfortable going and trusting that the other person can hold what they find there. Most of the time, they can. Most of the time, they are relieved. Because while we are busy building our armor, they are behind their own armor, waiting for someone to go first. The Buddha taught that all beings wish to be happy and free from suffering. When we remember this about the person we are arguing with, something shifts. They are not the enemy. They are another human being, reaching for the same things we are reaching for, and probably failing in the same ways. Their anger, like ours, is armor. And underneath it, like ours, there is something tender. Speaking from that tender place feels like putting down your shield in the middle of a fight. But it is also the only thing that ends the fight. Two people holding shields cannot embrace. Someone has to go first. There is one more story for this part of our journey. An old couple had been married for most of their lives. They were known in their village as steady, quiet people, and their marriage was a source of mild wonder to their neighbors, because in all those years, harsh words between them had been remarkably few. When the husband was very old and his wife had fallen ill, he sat beside her bed sorting through their belongings. She asked him to bring a box from the back of the cupboard, a box she had asked him years ago never to open. He brought it. She nodded for him to lift the lid. Inside were a few small cloth dolls, carefully stitched, and a modest sum of money. He looked at her, puzzled. "When we were first married," she said, "my grandmother told me that the secret to a lasting marriage was patience. She said that when I felt anger toward you, I should sit quietly and stitch a doll instead of speaking from the heat. She said it would give my hands something to do while the feeling passed through me. So that is what I did." The husband looked at the dolls again. He counted them. There were very few. Decades of marriage, and she had needed to stitch only a handful of times. He picked one up and turned it over in his hands. It was small and carefully made, each stitch even and deliberate. He tried to imagine her sitting somewhere in the house, angry with him about something he probably did not even remember, working the needle through the cloth until the anger softened and she could come back to him with a clear heart. He was moved beyond words. After a moment he said, "But what about the money?" She said, "That is from selling the others." He laughed quietly. So did she. It was the laugh of two people who had spent a lifetime learning how to hold their anger gently, and who knew that the learning was never finished. The dolls were not a sign of perfection. They were a record of the work. Each one represented a moment when the heat had come and she had chosen to sit with it, to let it pass through her hands instead of through her tongue. And the ones she had sold represented the times when even the stitching had not been quite enough and she had needed to start over. The fact that only a few remained after so many years, said something about what that patience had built between them. It said that the practice works, and it said that even the best practice has its difficult days. The deepest relationships are the ones where two people have learned to tell each other increasingly difficult truths. The early truths are easy. The later ones ask more of us. They ask us to be seen in the places where we are least sure of ourselves. They ask us to say, "I felt unlovable," instead of, "You never make time for me." They ask us to say, "I was afraid," instead of, "You are always angry." This kind of honesty does not come naturally to most of us. We have spent our whole lives learning to protect the tender places, not expose them. We have been rewarded for being strong, for having our case prepared, for being the one who does not flinch. So to stand in front of someone we love and say, "Here is where I am soft, here is where I ache, here is the old place that your words just touched," that feels like the most dangerous thing in the world. But the Buddha taught that what we most resist is often what most needs our attention. And the vulnerability we resist showing is often the very thing the other person has been waiting to see. Because when we show it, we give them permission to show theirs. And when two people are both standing in their undefended places, the distance between them collapses. There is nothing left to fight about. There is only what is true. You might try this in the days ahead. When a difficult conversation arises and you have done the inward work, try one sentence that begins, "Beneath my anger, I felt," and see what follows. You do not need to get it right. You do not need to be elegant. You just need to be real. And realness, more than any technique, is what opens the door between two people. Rest here for a breath. Let whatever stirred in you settle in its own time. When you are ready, we will go on. There is a misunderstanding that lives in the heart of many kind people. It goes something like this: if I am truly peaceful, I must accept everything. If my heart is open, I must keep it open to everyone, no matter what they do. If I am practicing compassion, I must never say no, never push back, never turn anyone away. This misunderstanding has left many gentle people exhausted, mistreated, and quietly furious at themselves for not being able to bear what they believe they should be able to bear. The Buddha was clear on this point. Compassion does not mean allowing harm. An open heart does not mean an unguarded life. Kindness includes the ability to say enough, and sometimes the kindest thing we can do for ourselves and for the person hurting us is to draw a clear line and hold it. The Buddhist teacher Pema Chodron put it plainly: when we find ourselves in a harmful relationship, we need to set clear boundaries. In the name of keeping our hearts open, many of us let people walk all over us. But keeping our hearts open and protecting ourselves are not opposites. They go together. A heart that cannot protect itself is not open. It is overwhelmed. This is the difference between a wall and a gate. A wall shuts everyone out. A gate lets people in, and it can also close when it needs to. A person with no boundaries has no gate. Anyone can walk in at any time. And a person with rigid boundaries has no opening at all. The middle way, as always, runs between. The question is, where does the boundary come from? If it comes from anger and hatred, it will carry that energy with it. It will feel like punishment. It will feel like exile. and it will keep the resentment alive in both people. But if the boundary comes from self-respect, from a quiet knowing of what we need in order to stay whole, it carries something very different. It carries care. Care for ourselves and, in a real way, care for the other person too. Because a clear boundary set with steadiness is far kinder than a resentful silence that lets the harm continue. There is an old story from the Indian teachings that makes this distinction vivid. A snake lived near a village path. He was large and fierce, and everyone in the area feared him. Travelers took longer routes to avoid the path. Children were warned away. Even grown men walked quickly and quietly if they had to pass that way. One day, a wandering teacher came along the same road. The villagers called out to him, "Do not go that way. There is a dangerous snake." But the teacher smiled and continued walking. The snake, seeing a stranger on his path, rose up to strike. But when he came close to the teacher, something in the man's stillness stopped him. The teacher looked at the snake calmly. "Why do you go about causing so much fear?" the teacher asked. The snake had no answer. "I will teach you something," the teacher said. "Repeat these words each day, and in time your nature will soften. And I ask you this: do not harm anyone." The snake agreed. The teacher went on his way. In the weeks that followed, the snake changed. He stopped striking at travelers. He stopped rising up at children. He lay quietly by the side of the path and let everyone pass. He ate only what fell to the ground. He grew thinner. He grew quieter. Something in him had genuinely softened, and the villagers noticed. At first they were relieved. Then they grew curious. Then they grew bold. A boy walked right past the snake without hurrying. Another came closer and called out to him. Still nothing. Word spread. The snake had lost his power. He was harmless now. What began as testing became routine unkindness. The boys teased him openly. They crowded around him, laughing. They nudged him aside with their feet when he was resting in the sun. No one feared him anymore, and without fear, they saw no reason to treat him with any respect at all. He stopped coming out to the path. He hid beneath a large rock, tired and thin, living on whatever scraps he could find. He did not understand what had gone wrong. He had done everything the teacher asked. He had given up his old ways entirely, and the result was that he had become invisible. By the time the teacher returned a year later, the snake was barely recognizable. The teacher called to him, and the snake crept out slowly, dusty and worn. "What has happened to you?" the teacher asked. "I followed your advice," the snake said. "I did not harm anyone. I did not strike. I did not threaten. And they have treated me as though I am nothing." The teacher looked at him for a long moment. His face was full of care. Then he said gently, "My friend, I told you not to bite. I never told you not to hiss." The snake was quiet as this settled in. "You do not need to harm anyone," the teacher continued. "But you must let people know that you can protect yourself. A hiss is not a bite. A warning is not an attack. You gave up your venom, and that was right. But you also gave up your voice, and that was too much. You can hold your ground without sinking your teeth into anyone. You can say no further without causing harm." This story has been told for generations because it speaks to something many people carry: the belief that gentleness means giving up all defense, that being peaceful means being passive, that the only choices are to bite or to be trampled. But there is a third option, the hiss, the clear, firm signal that says, I am here, I have limits, and I will not let you cross them. There is no venom in a hiss. There is no cruelty, no punishment, no desire for revenge. There is simply a boundary, spoken aloud, without apology. The snake's mistake was understandable. He took the teacher's instruction to its extreme. He heard, "Do not harm," and understood it as "do not protect." He confused kindness with the absence of all force. And he is not alone in this. Many of us make the same mistake. We confuse having an open heart with having no defenses at all. We confuse compassion with the willingness to absorb unlimited pain. And we end up, like the snake, hiding under a rock, wondering why the world is so unkind to us when we have been so kind to it. The answer, the teacher gently showed, is that kindness without strength is incomplete. A boundary set with care is not a failure of compassion. It is compassion applied to ourselves. In daily life, a hiss might sound like, "I will not continue this conversation if voices are raised." It might sound like, "I care about you, but I cannot be around this behavior." It might sound like, "I need to step away for a while." It might be a conversation about what you will and will not accept in a relationship, spoken calmly, without ultimatums and without anger. It might even be something as simple as leaving a room when the air has become too hot. These are not acts of aggression. They are acts of self-respect, and they are available to anyone at any time without the need to raise a voice or make an accusation. The boundary does its work quietly. It does not explain itself at length. It simply holds. There is another story that shows the other side of this. It concerns a man in a village who wronged his neighbor. The wrong was not enormous. The man had borrowed his neighbor's cart during the harvest, and while it was in his care, a wheel had broken. Rather than repairing it or replacing it, he returned the cart quietly, said nothing about the damage, and let his neighbor discover it on his own. It was a small thing, but it was clear, and everyone in the village knew what had happened. But the wronged neighbor, who was a kind and agreeable man, refused to speak of it. He smiled when they met. He continued to bring food on feast days. He acted, in every outward way, as though nothing had happened. His wife asked him why he did not say something. His friends asked the same. "I do not want to cause trouble," he said each time. "It would only make things worse. I would rather keep the peace." And so the wrong sat between them, unspoken. Months passed. The man who had committed the trespass grew more and more uncomfortable. He could feel the weight of what he had done every time he saw his neighbor's smile, because the smile was too even, too steady, too much like a mask. He wanted to apologize, to make it right, but the other man's silence gave him no opening. There was nothing to respond to. The pleasantness that met him at every turn was not real kindness. It was a closed door with a welcome sign on it. The wronged man, meanwhile, grew quieter inside himself. He smiled, but the smile cost him more each day. He was pleasant, but the pleasantness had a thin, brittle quality that his wife noticed even if he did not. Beneath the surface, resentment was building. He had swallowed the wrong instead of naming it. and the swallowed thing was slowly turning bitter. He began to avoid his neighbor when he could. He found reasons not to attend gatherings where they might meet. The peace he was keeping was costing him his peace. It was an elder in the village who finally brought them together. She sat them down and said to the wronged man, "You believe your silence is a kindness, but your neighbor has been carrying the weight of what he did, and your refusal to name it has given him no way to set it down. You think you are sparing him. You are trapping him, and you are trapping yourself." The wronged man protested, "I do not want to cause pain." "Speaking the truth is not causing pain," the elder said. "The pain is already there. Your silence has not prevented it. It has only buried it where neither of you can reach it." So the wronged man spoke. He said, simply and without cruelty, what had happened and how it had affected him. He did not shout. He did not accuse. He named the wrong clearly, and he named what he needed, an acknowledgement and a promise that it would not happen again. And the man who had done the wrong felt, for the first time in months, a loosening in his chest. He apologized. He meant it. And both men, for the first time since the trespass, were able to look each other in the eye. The elder said to them afterward, "Withholding honest words is not kindness. Sometimes, the most compassionate thing one person can do for another is to speak a truth that the other person needs to hear. A clear, caring boundary is a gift to both people." These two stories, the snake and the silent neighbor, carry the same teaching from different angles. The snake learned that protecting yourself is not the same as harming others. The neighbor learned that keeping the peace is not the same as burying the truth. Both of them had confused gentleness with disappearance. Both of them had to learn that a compassionate life includes the willingness to be clear. The Buddha spoke of the middle way as the path between extremes. In the case of boundaries, the extremes are easy to see. On one side, the person who bites, who lashes out, who punishes and controls. On the other, the person who takes everything, who smiles through mistreatment, who swallows every wrong until the resentment eats them from the inside. The middle way is the hiss. It is the calm, steady voice that says what is true, without cruelty and without retreat. It is the gate that opens and closes according to what the situation requires. And it is one of the most loving things a person can learn to do, both for themselves and for the people around them. Boundaries created from hatred bind us to the person we are pushing away. They keep the anger alive. They carry the energy of punishment and exile, and they leave both people worse off. But boundaries created from self-respect have a different quality entirely. They are firm without being hard. They are clear without being cruel. They carry the quiet message: I care about myself enough to protect what I need, and I care about you enough to be honest about where the line is. Forgiveness and boundaries can live in the same heart. You can release the resentment and still choose not to hand someone the same key twice. You can wish someone well and also wish them well from a distance. You can hold a person in kindness while also holding yourself in safety. These are not contradictions. They are the marks of a compassion that has grown up, a compassion that includes yourself in its circle of care. You might notice, in the days ahead, one place in your life where a kind, clear, enough is waiting to be said. You do not need to say it today. You do not need to plan it. Just notice it. See where the hiss is needed. And trust that when the time comes, you can speak it without venom. Let yourself settle for a moment There is nowhere to go and nothing to do. When your body feels ready, we will continue. One of the hardest questions in any close relationship is this: why must I do all the work? It is a question that comes up in almost every close relationship at some point. One person has done the inner work. One person has learned to pause, to make the U-turn, to speak from the vulnerable place. And the other person has not. The other person still reacts, still raises their voice, still goes cold or defensive or silent when things get difficult. And the one who has done the work looks at the unevenness and thinks, this is not fair. I am carrying this for both of us. Why should I be the one who always has to stay calm? Why should I be the one who pauses when they never do? It is a reasonable question, and the frustration behind it is real. There is a kind of loneliness that comes from being the one who understands in a relationship with someone who does not yet understand. You see the pattern clearly. You know what is happening. You can feel the cycle starting, and you know how it will end. But the other person is still inside the cycle, and they cannot see it the way you can. And so you carry the weight of the seeing, and sometimes that weight feels unfair. The honest answer is, it is not fair. Relationships are almost never evenly matched when it comes to emotional skill. One person usually has more practice. One person usually has more awareness. One person usually gets there first. And that person often ends up feeling like they are doing all the heavy lifting, while the other person gets to keep reacting without consequence. But fairness in relationships is rarely the point. The question is not whether the labor is evenly divided. The question is what kind of space we want to live in, and who is going to create it. The Buddha taught that we cannot wait for the world to be ready before we begin our practice. If we wait for conditions to be perfect, we will wait forever. The practice happens here, in this imperfect moment, with this imperfect person, in this imperfect relationship. And the person who can hold steady when things are uneven is not the loser in the arrangement. That person is the wellspring. Think of what happens in a room when one person is calm. The calm does not stay contained. It spreads. It changes the air. A steady voice in the middle of a heated conversation lowers the temperature for everyone. A person who can pause when the other cannot creates a container, a space where the other person's anger can rise and be felt without being matched, without being escalated, without being fed. This is not weakness. This is the most resourced position in any relationship. The person who can stay present when the other person is lost in reactivity is the one holding the lamp. And the lamp does not need the room to be bright before it can do its work. The lamp is what makes the room bright. We sometimes think that if we are the only one doing the inner work, the work is wasted. But the opposite is true. The inner work of one person changes the field for both. When one person stops reacting, the cycle of reactivity has nowhere to go. It runs out of fuel. The other person may keep pushing for a while, the way a wave keeps moving even after the wind has died. But eventually, without an opposing force to push against, the wave loses its energy. And in that calmer water, something new becomes possible. Unevenness is the ordinary condition of every relationship. No two people grow at the same pace. No two people arrive at the same insight at the same time. One person may understand something about anger that took years to learn, while the other is still at the beginning. This does not make the relationship broken. It makes the relationship real. And in that realness, the one who is further along has something to offer that no instruction or lecture can replace: the steady presence of someone who has already found the ground. There is a Zen story about a teacher at a mountain school where students came from many places to study. During one period of practice, a student was caught taking things that did not belong to him. Small things from the other students' rooms. A pouch of coins here. A writing brush there. The matter was reported to the teacher, and the other students asked that the young man be sent away. The teacher did nothing. A short while later, the same student was caught again. This time the other students were angry. They gathered together and wrote a letter, all of them signing it, saying that if the teacher did not send this student away, they would all leave together. The teacher read the letter carefully. Then he called everyone into the hall. He looked at the assembled students, the ones who had signed the letter and the one who had not, and he spoke. "You are wise," he said to them. "You know right from wrong. You understand what is honest and what is not. If you feel you must leave, you are free to go to any school in the country and continue your studies there. Any teacher would be fortunate to have you." He paused. The room was very quiet. "But this young man," he continued, "does not yet know right from wrong. He does not have what you have. He has not learned what you have learned. If I send him away, who will teach him? Who will hold the space for him to learn what he has not yet been able to learn on his own? I am going to keep him here, even if every one of you leaves." No one moved. The student who had been taking things stood at the back of the room, and tears were running down his face. Something in him broke open in that moment. The teacher had not excused what he did. He had not said it was acceptable. He had simply said, "I will not abandon you because you are the one who needs me most." And that was enough. The desire to steal left the young man entirely. He did not need punishment. He did not need exile. He needed someone who was willing to stay when everyone else wanted him gone. This is what it means to be the more resourced person in a relationship. It does not mean tolerating harm. It does not mean pretending the other person's behavior is acceptable. It means holding steady when they cannot. It means being the one who does not leave the room when things get hard, because your steadiness is the very thing that makes the room safe enough for the other person to begin changing. The teacher in the story did not win the argument. He did not prove himself right. He simply stood in his ground and refused to abandon the person who was furthest from understanding. And that standing, that quiet refusal to give up, did more than any punishment could have done. This is also what the transcript we have been drawing from tonight calls creating a safe container. When one person is steady, the whole relationship has somewhere to rest. The reactive person does not need to be met with more reactivity. They need to be met with ground, with earth, with something that does not shake when they shake. And over time, that ground becomes familiar. The reactive person begins to trust it. They begin to borrow from it. They begin, slowly and in their own way, to find their own ground. In our own lives, this might look very ordinary. It might look like staying calm when your partner raises their voice, and then, later, when the air has cleared, saying quietly what you need. It might look like choosing not to match someone's sarcasm with your own. It might look like going for a walk when the heat is too much, and coming back when you have found your center again. It will not always work. Sometimes the other person will not meet you, no matter how steady you are. Sometimes the gap between two people is too wide, and the right thing to do is step back and protect yourself. Boundaries are real, and they matter. But more often than we expect, steadiness creates an opening. The calm person in the room is not invisible. They are felt. And over time, their presence teaches something that no words can teach, that it is possible to be in the middle of a difficult moment and not lose yourself. There is one more story about this. In a mountain monastery, there lived a monk who had practiced for many decades. He was very old, and nothing seemed to disturb him. He moved through his days with a quiet steadiness that the younger students found remarkable and slightly unnerving. They had never seen him raise his voice. They had never seen him rattled by bad news or difficult people. He was like a stone at the bottom of a stream, unmoved by the current above him. One evening, a group of young students decided to test him. They wanted to see if the composure was real or just a performance. They hid in a dark hallway and waited for him to pass. He came around the corner carrying a cup of hot tea, walking slowly, as he always did. They leapt out at him, all at once, shouting as loud as they could. The monk did not flinch. He did not drop the cup. He did not spill a single drop. He continued walking, steady and unhurried, to the small table at the end of the hall. He set the cup down gently, and then, leaning against the wall, he let out a quiet breath and said, "Oh, my." The students watched this in silence. They had expected a reaction. They had expected to see the composure crack, to catch the monk being human for once. Instead, they saw something they had never quite understood before. The monk was not pretending to be calm. He was not holding himself together through force of will. He had simply practiced for so long that the steadiness had become part of him. It was not a mask. It was who he was. And they realized, standing there in that hallway, that his years of practice had given them something they could not get from any text or lecture. They had seen, in a living person, what it looks like to be at home inside yourself. To be so settled in your own ground that even a sudden shock does not knock you off it. And that seeing changed something in them. It gave them a picture of what was possible. Being the steady one is not a burden, even when it feels like one. It is a gift you give to the people around you, often without knowing it. Your calm in a difficult moment does not go unnoticed. Your willingness to pause when others cannot is not wasted. It ripples outward. It changes the air. It shows the people in your life, by example, that there is another way to meet difficulty. And when you are not steady, when you lose your ground and react and say the thing you wish you had not said, that is part of the practice too. You forgive it. You notice it. You come back to the ground when you can. There is no version of this practice that demands perfection. There is only the willingness to return. The monk in the hallway was not born steady. He practiced for decades, and in those decades there were surely countless moments when he was not steady at all, moments he stumbled and lost his composure and had to find it again. The steadiness we saw at the end of his life was built from all those moments of returning. The Buddha said, "You yourself must walk the path. No one can walk it for you." In a relationship where one person is further along, this is true for both people. The steadier one walks their path, the other walks theirs. And the steadier ones walking, quiet and consistent, makes the path visible for the one who is still finding their way. You might try this. The next time you are the calm one in a difficult exchange, instead of resenting the imbalance, silently offer your steadiness. May my calm be a place where this person can rest, even for a moment. You do not need to say it aloud. Just hold it inside and see what happens. Let yourself be quiet now. There is no need to carry anything. What you have heard will settle on its own. When the time feels right, we will continue. Understanding anger from the outside is one thing. We can follow the teachings. We can nod along with the stories. We can agree, in principle, that anger is a messenger, that the pause is where freedom lives, that the U-turn brings us home. But there is a difference between understanding water and drinking it. At some point, the knowing has to move from the head to the body. At some point, we have to walk through the territory ourselves. That is what we are going to do now. We are going to move slowly through an old conflict, together, the way you might walk along the bank of a river, noticing what is there without trying to change it. There is nothing to fix here, nothing to solve, just something to see. There is an old Buddhist story about a young attendant who was traveling with the Buddha and a group of followers. It was a hot day, and they had been walking for hours. The Buddha asked the attendant to go to a nearby stream and bring back water for the group to drink. The attendant walked to the stream. When he arrived, he found that a line of ox carts had just crossed through it. The wheels had churned the bottom, and the water was brown and clouded, full of mud and broken leaves. He could not see the bottom. He tried cupping some in his hands, but it was gritty and undrinkable. He stood there for a moment, unsure what to do, then walked back. "The water is too muddy to drink," he told the Buddha. "The carts have stirred it up. It is full of dirt." "Go back," the Buddha said. "Wait a while and look again." The attendant returned to the stream. It looked the same. Cloudy, stirred up, undrinkable. He waited a short while, growing impatient in the heat, then walked back again. "It is still muddy," he said. "Go back," the Buddha said. "Sit beside the stream. Do not try to clear it. Just sit and watch." This time the attendant sat down on the bank. He did not reach into the water. He did not stir it. He did not walk upstream to find a cleaner source. He did not do anything at all. He simply sat and watched. And slowly, in its own time, the mud began to settle. The heavy particles drifted down to the bottom. The water grew clearer, layer by layer. The leaves floated to the edges and gathered there. Without anyone doing anything, without any effort or force, the stream returned to itself. Clear and cool and still. The attendant filled his vessel and brought the water back. The Buddha said, "The mind is like this. When it is stirred up, you cannot see clearly. You cannot force it to be still. You only need to stop stirring and give it time to settle." This is the image we are going to carry with us now. The stirred up stream, the muddy water, and the simple, quiet act of sitting beside it and waiting. We have spent a long time tonight talking about anger, about the pause, about the U-turn, about boundaries and responsibility and honesty. All of that is the map. Now we are going to walk the territory. Because that is what we are going to do now with a conflict of our own. Slowly and with care. There is no rush. If at any point you would rather just listen and rest, that is perfectly fine. You can return to this practice another time. But if you are willing, let us walk through it together. Let yourself think of a time, recent or old, when you felt anger or resentment towards someone you care about. It does not need to be a dramatic conflict. It can be small. A comment that stung. A promise that was not kept. A moment when you felt unseen or dismissed or taken for granted. Whatever comes to mind first is usually the right one. Do not search for the perfect example. Just let one arrive. Let the scene come into focus. Where were you? What time of day was it? What was said or not said? What happened in your body when the moment landed? Let it play out the way you remember it, without editing, without judging yourself or the other person. Just let the memory arrive, the way a scene appears on still water. Now, the way the attendant sat beside the stream, let yourself sit beside this memory. You are not in the middle of it. You are on the bank. You can see it, but it is not pulling you under. You are watching it from a place of safety, the way you might watch a storm from inside a warm room. And like the stream after the carts have passed, the surface of this memory may be churned and muddy. Anger, frustration, the urge to build the case again, to rehearse what you should have said, to replay the moment when the other person was clearly wrong. Let all of that be there. Do not try to clear it. Do not push it away. Do not tell yourself you should be over it by now. Just watch. Give it time. The mud settles on its own. Slowly, the way the mud settles in still water, let the surface begin to clear. As the heat of the memory cools, see if you can notice what is underneath the anger. The feeling that was there before the anger wrapped around it. The quieter thing that the anger was protecting. Are you hurt? Do you feel dismissed, overlooked, unseen? Do you feel afraid of something? Afraid of losing this person? Afraid that they do not care the way you need them to? Do you feel a distance between you and this person that you wish were not there? Whatever you find, just name it quietly. You do not need to announce it. You do not need to explain it or justify it. Just let the word come. Hurt, fear, loneliness, sadness, grief. Whatever it is, it has been there for a while, waiting for you to notice. And now, having found that feeling, see if you can turn toward it with some gentleness. The way you might turn toward a child who is upset. Not with a solution, not with advice, just with attention, with warmth, with the quiet message, I see you. You are allowed to be here. If it helps, you can place your hand over your chest, just resting it there, the way you would rest a hand on someone's shoulder to say, I am here. I am not going anywhere. This is the U-turn made real. This is what it actually feels like to turn inward and meet what is there with kindness rather than judgment. The anger was the surface. The hurt was beneath it. And beneath the hurt, there is usually a need. To be valued. To be safe. To be close. To matter. To be told the truth. See if you can feel that need without rushing to fill it. Just let it be present. Let it be heard, maybe for the first time in a long time. This part of you has been asking for something, and the anger was its way of asking. Now you are listening directly, without the anger as a go-between. And that listening, all by itself, is a kind of healing. There is a story about a woman, very old, who was known in her family for her quietness. Every evening, after the household had settled, she would sit alone for a while, in a corner of the room, doing nothing visible. Her grandchildren asked her once what she was doing. "I am gathering the pieces," she said. They did not understand. During the day, she told them, "Pieces of me get scattered. A worry here, a frustration there, a small hurt I did not have time to feel. By evening, they are spread out in all directions. So I sit here and gather them back into one place. By the time I am done, I am whole again." From this quieter place, you might gently turn your attention to the other person in the conflict you recalled, the one who triggered the anger. And from where you are sitting now, on the bank of the settled stream, see if you can wonder about what was happening inside them. They had their own stirred-up water, their own muddy stream. Their anger, too, was carrying something underneath it. A fear, perhaps. A hurt of their own. A need that was not being met. You do not need to know exactly what it was. You do not need to guess correctly. You just need to remember that it was there. That they, too, were reacting from a place that felt threatened or unseen or afraid. This does not mean what they did was acceptable. It does not mean you have to agree with them. It just means widening the frame enough to hold both of you in it. Your hurt and theirs. Your need and theirs. Two people, each carrying something tender, each reaching for something they did not know how to ask for. Two muddy streams, stirred up by the same passing carts. The Buddha taught that all beings wish to be happy and free from suffering. Every person we meet, even the ones who have hurt us, is trying to find their way to something better and falling short in ways they may not even understand. When we remember this, something loosens. The grip of the grievance relaxes, just a little. The story of who was right and who was wrong loses some of its charge. And in that loosening, we find a little more room to breathe. A little more room to be kind, both to the other person and to ourselves. There is a story about a woman, very old, who was known in her family for her quietness. Every evening, after the household had settled and the children were in bed and the day's work was done, she would sit alone for a while in a corner of the room, doing nothing visible. She sat very still. Sometimes her eyes were open, sometimes closed. Her family was used to it, but her grandchildren, who were young enough to be curious about everything, asked her once what she was doing. "I am gathering the pieces," she said. They did not understand. During the day, she told them, "Pieces of me get scattered. A worry here, a frustration there, a small hurt I did not have time to feel, a kind word I meant to say and forgot. By evening, they are spread out in all directions, and I am spread out with them. So I sit here and gather them back into one place. I pick them up, one by one, and I bring them home. By the time I am done, I am whole again." The children watched her for a while after that. They did not fully understand, but they understood enough. They understood that their grandmother was doing something important in that quiet corner. She was putting herself back together, and the steadiness they felt from her The warmth and the calm that everyone in the family relied on came from this small daily act of gathering. This is what we have been doing together tonight. Gathering the scattered pieces, sitting with the stirred up water until it settles, turning toward the places in ourselves that have been asking for attention and offering them something simple, the knowledge that we are listening. What we have just done together is the practice itself. There is nothing further to do with it. You can return to this any time, with any conflict, any stirred up memory. Sit beside it. Let it settle. Find the feeling underneath the feeling. Offer it kindness. And then, when you are ready, widen the frame to include the other person. You do not need to do anything with what you have found. You do not need to call anyone or write anything down. What has been seen has been seen. What has been felt. And the water, having settled once, knows how to settle again. Let yourself rest now, the way the old woman rested after gathering her pieces, whole and quiet. When you feel ready, we will continue together. In every long love, in every long friendship, there comes a winter, a silence that lasts too long, a distance that neither person quite knows how to close. The argument may have ended days or weeks ago, but the cold it left behind is still in the room. The words have stopped, but the warmth has not yet returned. And both people are waiting, each one hoping the other will be the first to reach across. This is one of the loneliest places two people can share. Close enough to touch, far enough apart that neither one knows how to begin. The daily routines continue. The meals are cooked and eaten. The ordinary business of life goes on. But underneath the surface, both people can feel the absence of something that used to be there. The ease, the trust, the simple pleasure of being in the same room. All of it covered now by a thin layer of frost that neither person laid down on purpose and neither person knows how to lift. The Buddha taught that all things are impermanent. Joy passes. Grief passes. And winter, if we are patient with it, passes too. But the passing does not always happen on its own. Sometimes the season needs help. Sometimes it needs one person to step forward and say, by their actions or their words, I am ready for this to end. Someone has to be gracious first. Someone has to take the step that pride keeps telling them not to take. Someone has to say, in word or gesture, I would rather have you than be right. That is what grace looks like in the middle of a hard season. It looks like one person choosing warmth before the other has earned it. And it is almost always the thing that saves. There is a story, told in many places, about two brothers who farmed neighboring pieces of land in a quiet valley. For most of their lives, they had worked side by side. They shared tools. They helped each other with the planting and the harvest. Their families ate together. Their children played together. The boundary between their two farms was a narrow meadow with a small stream running through it, and neither of them had ever thought much about where one farm ended and the other began. Then one season, a misunderstanding grew between them. It started small. A disagreement about where a new irrigation channel should run, something that affected both their fields. The kind of thing that could have been settled over a meal. But it was not settled. It was left to sit, and as it sat, it hardened. One brother thought the other was being selfish. The other thought his brother was being unreasonable. Neither said so directly. Instead, small comments were exchanged. A borrowed tool was not returned. An invitation to a meal was not offered. The silence between them grew thicker with each passing week, filling up with all the things that were not being said. Their families felt it. Their children, who had grown up running freely between the two farms, began to sense the tension and stopped crossing the meadow. The wives exchanged glances at the village market but did not speak. A coldness settled over what had once been the warmest part of both their lives. Months passed. The narrow meadow between their farms, which had once been a place of connection, became a boundary line. Neither brother crossed it. Each waited for the other to apologize first, and neither did. One day, the older brother hired a traveling carpenter who had come through the valley looking for work. "You see that stream?" the older brother said, pointing to the meadow. "My brother and I are no longer on good terms. I want you to build a fence along that stream, a tall one. I do not want to see his farm, and I do not want him to see mine." The carpenter nodded. "I understand," he said. "I have enough wood. Give me a few days." The older brother left for the far side of his land, where he had work to do, and did not return for 3 days. When he came back, he stopped at the edge of the meadow and stared. There was no fence. Instead, where the stream ran between the two farms, the carpenter had built a bridge. A simple, solid wooden bridge, wide enough for a cart to cross. The older brother stood there, not knowing what to say. And as he stood there, he saw his younger brother walking toward him from the other side. The younger brother had seen the bridge being built and assumed his older brother had ordered it. He had assumed it was an invitation, a gesture of peace. And so he had come, walking across the bridge with his hands open at his sides and tears on his face. The two brothers met in the middle of the bridge. They did not say much. They did not need to. The younger one embraced the older one, and the older one let himself be embraced, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. When they stepped apart, the older brother turned to thank the carpenter. But the carpenter was already packing his tools. "Stay," the older brother said. "I have more work for you here. There is always something to build." The carpenter shook his head and smiled. "I would like to," he said, "but I cannot. There are more bridges to build." There is so much in this story. The misunderstanding that grew because it was not tended. The fence that was ordered and the bridge that was built instead. The younger brother who saw the bridge and assumed the best instead of the worst. And the carpenter who knew something that neither brother could see, that what they needed was not a wall between them, but a way across. Someone must be gracious first. That is the teaching at the center of this story, and at the center of everything we have explored tonight. In the middle of a cold season between two people, someone has to choose to cross. Someone has to lay down the grievance and pick up the offering. And it does not matter who goes first. What matters is that someone does. Grace is not agreement. It is not saying you were right and I was wrong. It is not pretending the hurt did not happen. It is not weakness, and it is not surrender. Grace is simply the willingness to value the relationship more than the argument. To say, through action if not through words, whatever happened between us, I would rather be close to you than far from you. And I am willing to take the first step, even if you have not yet taken yours. This takes courage, real courage. because the person who goes first does not know what will happen. The younger brother did not know, as he walked across the bridge, whether his older brother would meet him or turn away. He walked anyway. He chose closeness over certainty. And that choice, that willingness to risk rejection for the sake of connection, is the bravest thing any person can do in a relationship. Every long relationship has its winters. Every friendship, every marriage, every bond between parent and child will pass through seasons when the warmth disappears and the silence feels permanent. These winters are not the end of love. They are the test of it. And the test is always the same. Who will choose warmth first? Who will cross the meadow before they know what waits on the other side? There is one more story for this part of our journey. A humble maker of tea lived in a small town. He was not a scholar or a man of any particular standing. He made tea, and he made it beautifully. Every movement in his practice was unhurried. Every gesture was full of attention. He did not rush. He did not perform. He simply gave himself completely to what he was doing, and the result was a kind of stillness that filled the room. One day, a proud stranger passed through the town and heard about this tea maker. Something about the way people spoke of him irritated the stranger. He could not understand why a simple man who made tea should be spoken of with such respect. He decided to challenge him. He sent word that he would visit the tea maker the following morning, and that he expected to see what all the talk was about. The tea maker was troubled. He was not a man who sought attention or conflict, and the stranger's tone carried something sharp in it. That evening, he went to see an elder he trusted and asked for advice. "What should I do?" he asked. "This man wants to challenge me, and I do not know how to meet him. I am not a man of words. I do not know how to argue or defend myself. All I know is tea." The elder smiled. "Then you already have your answer," she said. "Meet him exactly as you meet your tea. Do what you do every morning. Give your full attention to every step. Hold nothing back and add nothing extra. Be completely present, the way you are when you are at your best. That is all you have ever needed to do, and it is enough." The tea maker went home and slept, and in the morning he prepared his room the way he always did. The stranger arrived early. He walked into the tea room with his chest forward and his voice loud, filling the small space with his presence. He was ready for a confrontation. He expected to find something to dismiss, something to push against, some pretension he could expose. The tea maker looked up from his work and bowed. Then he returned to what he was doing. He heated the water with steady hands. He prepared the cups one by one. He moved with the same quiet attention he brought to every morning of his life. There was no hurry in him. There was no fear. There was no performance. There was simply a man doing what he knew how to do, with his whole heart in it. The stranger watched. He had come expecting to find resistance. But there was nothing to resist. The tea maker's presence was complete and still, the way a lake is still on a windless morning. There was no point of attack. There was nothing to argue with. There was only this quiet man, this warm room, this cup being prepared with care. The stranger sat down. He accepted a cup. He drank. And somewhere in the quiet of that room, his pride softened. He bowed to the tea maker, thanked him, and left without a word of challenge. Presence dissolved what force could not. The tea maker did not win. He did not argue. He did not defend himself. He simply showed up, fully, as himself. and that was enough. We have traveled a long way tonight. From the porcupines huddling together in the coldest winter, to the messenger at the gate with a letter we had never opened, to the pause that holds our whole freedom, to the U-turn that brings us home, to the hiss that protects without harming, to the settled stream that clears on its own. And here, at the end, we arrive at the simplest teaching of all. Someone must be gracious first. In every conflict, in every frozen silence, in every winter between two hearts, someone must choose warmth before it has been earned. Someone must build the bridge before they know whether the other person will cross it. And the beautiful secret of the carpenter's story is this: the younger brother crossed the bridge because he believed his brother had built it for him. He did not know it was built by a stranger. He assumed the best. He assumed love. And that assumption was enough to bring him across. We can be that assumption for the people in our lives. We can be the bridge and the crossing. We can be the one who reaches first, who softens first, who says, "I am here," before the other has found the courage to say it. Remember the porcupines from the very beginning of our time together. They tried distance and they tried closeness, and both had a cost. And in the end, they chose the cost that came with warmth. They chose to stay together, quills and all. They did not stop being porcupines. They just learned to hold each other more gently. That is the whole teaching. Right there. Be close. Be gentle. And when you forget to be gentle, come back and try again. You do not need to do any of this tonight. But you might let one relationship come to mind. One person. One distance that has lasted longer than it needs to. And quietly, without pressure, without expectation, you might wish that distance well. You might wish it spring. Let yourself rest here. Let the whole evening settle the way the stream settled in its own time. When you are ready, we will close together. We began with the porcupines. Two truths that arrived together. Closeness brings friction, and friction does not mean failure. The people nearest to us carry the sharpest quills, and we carry ours. And the decision to stay close despite the small, ongoing cost of contact is the decision that keeps us alive through the coldest seasons. The warmth is the point. The quills are the price. And the ferrymen on the river, who quarreled every day for 20 years, showed us what a life without friction actually looks like. It looks like a life without anyone close enough to care. From there, we met the messenger. Anger is not the enemy. It is not a flaw in our character or a sign that something is wrong with us. It is a signal, ancient and intelligent, that something we care about needs attention. Beneath every anger, a need. Beneath every flare of heat, a quieter voice saying, "I need to be safe," or "I need to be respected," or "I need to matter." The anger is the knock at the door. The need is the visitor waiting outside. Then we found the pause. The small space between the sting and the strike, so easy to miss, wide enough to hold our whole freedom. In that space we learned to make the U-turn, to look inward before looking outward, to find what is actually happening in our own heart before we respond to what is happening in the room. The counselor who delayed, the potter who sat in her courtyard, the ruler whose cup was inscribed with 4 words. All of them discovered the same thing. When we stop long enough to feel what we feel, wisdom arrives on its own. We looked at the cost of acting from anger, the distance it creates, the defenses it raises, the way shouting measures how far two hearts have moved apart. The Zen master by the river, explaining to his students that lovers whisper because their hearts are close, and angry people shout because their hearts are far away. And we learn the difference between anger felt and anger acted out. The feeling informs, the acting burns. We explored responsibility, 100%. The strange freedom of no longer waiting for someone else to fix what is happening inside us. The patient man who discovered that his patience had never been tested. The elder who told both neighbors they were right and watched the grip of rightness loosen. Being right is a thin comfort when the relationship is suffering. And we learn that responsibility is not the same as blame. It is not, this is my fault. It is, this is mine to tend. We sat with vulnerability. The couple who said all the right words and felt nothing until each of them found the tender place underneath the argument and spoke from there. The wife and her stitched dolls, each one a moment of anger, transformed by patience and quiet hands. We learned that technique without heart changes nothing, and that truth, even clumsily spoken, opens doors that careful language never can. We met the snake, who learned to hiss. Compassion without boundaries is incomplete. Kindness that cannot say no is not yet whole. The neighbor who swallowed every wrong and called it peace until the swallowed thing turned bitter. The elder who told them both that withholding honest words is not kindness. A clear, firm line, spoken without venom, is one of the kindest things a person can offer to themselves and to the person on the other side of it. We held the uneven path, the loneliness of being the steady one, the frustration of doing the inner work while the other person keeps reacting, the teacher who would not send away the student who needed him most, the monk whose years of practice were visible in a single unhurried step down a dark hallway. Steadiness is not a burden. It is a lamp. And the lamp does not need the room to be bright before it can do its work. We let the water settle. We sat beside a stirred-up memory and watched the mud drift down, and underneath the anger we found hurt, and underneath the hurt we found a need, and we turned toward that need with gentleness rather than judgment. The old woman in her corner, gathering the scattered pieces of her day back into one basket, putting herself back together with nothing but patience and stillness. And we arrived at grace, the carpenter's bridge, the tea maker's presence. Someone must be gracious first. Someone must choose warmth before it has been earned, must build the crossing before they know whether anyone will use it. And the beautiful thing about grace is that it is almost always mistaken for love. The younger brother crossed the bridge because he believed it was a gift. And in a way, it was. All of these teachings point in the same direction. They are not separate lessons. They are different angles on a single truth. The way through anger is inward, and the way out is through honesty, and the way forward is through kindness, beginning with kindness toward ourselves. The Buddha spent his life teaching that suffering is not a punishment, and happiness is not a reward. They are both the natural results of how we meet what comes to us. When we meet anger with reactivity, suffering follows. When we meet it with awareness, with the pause, with the willingness to look at what is really happening inside us, something else follows. Not perfection, not the end of difficulty, but a deeper steadiness, a wider view, a heart that can hold more without breaking. None of this is finished. The practice of working with anger is not a project with an end date. It is more like tending a garden. You do not tend a garden once and call it done. You return to it. Season after season, you pull the weeds that grew back while you were not looking. You water what is dry. You notice what needs attention this time, which may be different from what needed attention last time. And the garden, slowly, over years, becomes something you could not have planned, something that grew from the tending itself. This is how the Buddhist path works. It is not a straight line from confusion to clarity. It is a spiral. We return to the same lessons again and again, but each time we return, we see them from a slightly different place. The teaching on anger that meant nothing to us last year may land differently this year, because this year we have been hurt in a way we had not been hurt before. The practice of the pause that seemed impossible last month may come more easily this month, because we have been practicing without realizing it. The spiral keeps turning, and each turn brings us a little closer to the center. There will be days when you pause beautifully, when the anger rises and you catch it, and you make the U-turn, and you find the need beneath the heat, and you speak from the honest place, and the other person hears you. Those days are real, and there will be days when you miss it entirely. When the old pattern fires before you can blink, and you say the thing you swore you would never say again. Those days are real too. And they are not failures. They are part of the garden. They are the weeds that remind you the work is ongoing, and that the ongoing nature of the work is not a problem. It is the work itself. You do not need to remember everything from tonight. You do not need to carry all of it with you. What landed will stay. What did not land may land later, on a day when you need it and did not know you had it. The teachings have a way of doing that. They settle into the ground quietly and come up when the season is right. If there is one thing to carry, it might be this. The next time anger rises, before the old pattern takes over, see if you can pause for one breath. Just one. And in that breath, turn inward. Ask, what do I actually feel right now? What do I need? You may not get an answer. You may not have time to finish the question before the moment moves on. That is fine. The asking itself is the practice. And the practice, done once, makes the next time a little easier. The porcupines are still huddled together in their hollow, pricked and warm. The messenger is still waiting at the gate with a letter we are only now learning to read. The stream is still settling, clear and patient, beneath whatever stirs its surface. And we are still here, together, present, which is more than enough. Let yourself rest now. Let the whole night settle. There is nothing left to hold. Tonight we sat with anger, the way you sit with someone you have been avoiding for a long time. We did not fight it. We did not fix it. We listened to it. And beneath its voice, we found what it had been trying to say all along, that something we care about needed our attention, that somewhere inside us, a need was waiting to be heard. We learned that the pause is where our freedom lives, that turning inward before turning outward changes everything, that speaking from the vulnerable place, the hurt beneath the anger, the fear beneath the hurt, is the only thing that truly opens the door between two people. We learned that boundaries and kindness are not opposites, that being the steady one in a relationship is not a burden but a gift, that the water settles on its own when we stop stirring, and that someone, in every frozen silence, must be gracious first. You do not need to remember any of this. You do not need to perform it or practice it or get it right. What was heard tonight will keep working quietly, in its own time, in its own way. The seeds do not need our help to grow. They only need the ground we have already given them. May you be gentle with your own heart. May you be gentle with the hearts around you. And may the winters between you and the people you love always find their way to spring. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk.